Have you ever thought about what happens after death? What if someone came back with an urgent message from Jesus about 4 events that will shake the world in May 2025? In today's video, you will hear the true story of Ethan Cole, who was dead for 11 minutes and saw the celestial clock resetting. What he witnessed will impact you deeply. Watch until the end. Before it's too late, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and comment from which city you are watching. I call myself Ethan Cole. I'm 36 years old, and until that day, I was just another ordinary American living in Flagstaff, Arizona. I worked as a network technician, and I was always skeptical. Religion? Sky? Life after death? I laughed at these ideas. But everything changed one ordinary morning, April 2025. It was a hot and dry Sunday, like so many others in the desert. I had woken up with a strange pain in my chest, but I thought it was just heartburn. My wife, Riley, insisted we go to the hospital, but I refused. "I just need coffee," I said. An hour later, I was lying on the kitchen floor without a pulse. My heart had stopped. According to doctors, they were 11 minutes of clinical death. No cardiac activity, no neurological response. But what no one knew is that in those 11 minutes, I saw the end approaching. I'm not talking about a movie apocalypse. I'm talking about a direct warning from Jesus Christ himself. The clock is ticking. Those were the first words I heard when I woke up in a place that seemed out of time. It was like being in a vacuum between heartbeats. There was no color. There was no sound. Just a presence, strong, unmistakable. I wasn't floating. I didn't see a tunnel. It was different from anything I've ever heard in other reports. It was as if time had frozen, and I was on the outside of the universe, looking at it as if it were a glass globe. And then, he appeared. Not walking, not flying. He was. Jesus. I know how absurd this sounds, but it wasn't an idealized image, nor like the paintings I saw as a child. It was like looking at the origin of all existence. The very meaning of the word life had shape at that moment. He looked at me, and everything inside me, all the mistakes, all the lies, all the questions, came to the surface like a whirlwind. But he didn't accuse me. He showed me. 4 images appeared before me. They were not vague visions. They were real, future, already marked events, all in May 2025. He told me, "You have been blind for a long time, Ethan, but now you will see. You will be my witness. The world needs to prepare, or it will be too late." It wasn't a choice. It was a calling, and what I saw will shake you too. I don't know how to explain exactly what that place was like, because it didn't look like anything that exists here. There was no ground. There was no sky. It was like I was floating inside a living presence. The strangest thing is that I didn't feel my body, but still, I knew it was me. I was fully aware. My memories, my feelings, my fears, everything was there, but without pain, without confusion. It was like being completely lucid, only in another dimension. Suddenly, I started to notice a light, but it was no ordinary light. It was a light that seemed to know me. She crossed me, as if to say, "I know who you are, Ethan, all of you." And there, from the center of that light, he appeared, Jesus, but not in the way I imagined, not like a man in a white robe and sandals. He was the light itself, a conscience, a presence that filled me with love, but also with truth, a truth so intense that it almost tore me apart. I didn't hear words with my ears. The words came straight to the soul. It was as if he spoke to every part of my being at the same time. "Time is running out." That's what he said. And with that, 4 images began to form before me. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was like to enter in that each scene had smell, sound, sensation. I lived that as if it were there. The first scene, I saw the entire world, seen from above, like a living map. Golden lines began to appear in the most unexpected places. In villages in Africa, schools in Indonesia, prisons in Texas, forests in the Amazon. These lines pulsed like heartbeats, and they connected to each other. And then I understood. It was a spiritual awakening. Ordinary people, of all languages and religions, were having the same inner impulse, a hunger for something that goes beyond what is visible. It wasn't religion. It was something deeper, a calling, a reminder of what was always there. And Jesus told me, or rather, he deployed the idea in me. This is the first sign. a great awakening, but not everyone will accept it. At the same time, I saw the contrast. I saw faces deformed by fear, by anger, people clinging to the lies of the world as if they were lifelines. The light was coming, but the darkness would also react. I felt the weight of it in my being, as if the entire earth was about to break, like a dam about to burst. Was May 2025, the month in which eyes would be opened or closed for good. And before I could understand everything, the scene changed. The second vision did not arrive like the first. It didn't come with golden light or that feeling of expansion. It came with a weight, a dense silence, as if the air itself had been drained. I found myself hovering over big cities, New York, London, São Paulo, Tokyo, huge buildings, crowded streets, but there was something wrong. The rhythm of things was broken, as if the world's engine was trying to run, but without oil, without gears. And then I understood. It was the economy. The entire system was falling apart. Not like a bomb, not like an instant crash. It was like a slow implosion, an invisible collapse in which no one noticed until it was too late. I saw stock markets crashing, banks freezing funds, people panicking. But the most terrifying thing was seeing the faces of ordinary people, family men, young graduates, retired seniors, all with the same look. And now, I saw a woman screaming in front of an empty ATM, a father trying to exchange food for a cell phone charger. I saw business people in glass buildings breaking down in tears because their numbers, their accounts, their empires had turned to dust. But alongside that, something unexpected started to happen. In the poorest neighborhoods, in small towns, people started to come together. Groups were formed not for profit but for survival, and later, for love. I saw a group of young people cultivating community gardens. I saw a woman opening her garage to teach children. I saw churches being reopened not as institutions, but as shelters for the soul. And then Jesus spoke again, this time more firmly. The second event will be a fall, but not to destroy, to purify, to transform. He made me to feel that, not just see the fear, the despair, the loneliness of those who lose everything, but also hope born from nothing, like a flower sprouting on the asphalt. He showed me that May 2025 would not just be chaos, it would be a revelation. The false foundations of the world would crumble, and there would be room for something new, fairer, more connected, more true. It was then that a flash enveloped everything, and suddenly, I was somewhere else, and I knew the third vision was coming. The transition was almost like a sigh, a deep silence, followed by something I can only describe as a presence that filled the air like sacred perfume. I no longer saw the world from above. Now, I was among people. It was as if I had been placed in several places at once. A wooden church in Appalachia, a tent in the middle of an African desert, a grassy field behind a school in India, a modest apartment in Detroit. And in all these places, one thing happened at the same time. People were praying, but it was no ordinary prayer. It was neither rehearsed nor beautiful, was gross, raw, real. There were people falling to their knees alone in the middle of the room, crying in silence, screaming to the heavens, muttering words they didn't even understand. And Jesus was there, in all these places, not visible as before, but present in every tear, in every sigh, in every scream. And then I realized, the third event was a revival, a return to the sacred, but not in the way that institutionalized religions preach. It was something spontaneous, uncontrollable, a fire that spread from heart to heart. I saw young people who had never believed before bending their knees on the floor of dark nightclubs. I saw atheists at universities being overcome by something that made them cry in the middle of a lecture. I saw criminals in small cells with their hands raised, as if they were holding the sky. It was so intense that I also wanted to kneel there, even without having a body. It was as if the atmosphere itself was saying, "Time's for home." Jesus spoke within me. They will seek me. Not all, but many. The human heart will recognize the truth when it touches the soul. I saw 8-year-old children teaching their parents how to pray. I saw doctors praying before surgeries. I saw entire families kneeling around the dinner table. And it wasn't just faith, it was treatment. I have seen broken marriages restored by a simple whispered prayer of repentance. I saw people giving up addictions as if an invisible chain had broken. I saw forgiveness being released between parents and children who hadn't spoken to each other in decades. It was the most beautiful moment of my entire experience. The world was bending, and not out of fear, but for love, truly, by presence. And I understood. This revival was not an event, was a preparation, a warming of the soul for what was yet to come. And then, without warning, the sky opened before me, and what I saw next was simply cosmic. I was no longer among people. There were no buildings, no land, no human voices. It was space, the universe, but not the way we see in NASA documentaries or photos. This was different here, was vivo. Each star pulsed like a heart. Every planet seemed to have consciousness. It was as if the cosmos were waiting for something, and then it happened. The sky moved. I don't know how to explain it. It was as if all the constellations had arranged a secret meeting. Planets, stars, moons, everything began to align with impossible precision. And I understood. That was the fourth event, the signal. Jesus did not appear with words, but understanding came as a direct download into my soul. This will be the sign. Heaven will speak, and everyone will listen. That's when the most unbelievable show I've ever seen began. Lines of light began to dance between the stars. Rivers of blue fire crossed the firmament. Golden circles formed between stars. It was as if the Creator himself was drawing something in the heavens. But the most impressive thing was the humanity's reaction. I saw thousands, millions of people stopping what they were doing. I saw workers dropping tools, children dropping toys, drivers braking their cars in the middle of the road, all looking at the sky, and nobody said anything. Nobody screamed. Nobody ran. They just looked. There was a global silence, an instinctive respect, as if the whole world knew, at that moment, that they were facing something sacred. It was a reminder, a warning, a calling, and the message that came was not a spoken prophecy, but a certainty in the hearts of everyone who watched. Something bigger than all this is coming. Get ready. This cosmic sign wasn't just beautiful. He divided the story into before and after. I felt it in the bones of my soul, and the feeling was clear. In May 2025, the sky would not just show a sign, he would confirm everything. And then, without me asking, without me understanding, Jesus took me back to the light. But this time, it wasn't just him who was waiting for me. When that light enveloped me again, I thought everything was over, that the visions were over, that now it would just be silence. But it was exactly the opposite. I was taken to a place, indescribable. It was like an open field but without ground, a space outside of space. And there they were, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions, beings that shone with their own light, some in simple clothes, others with costumes that seemed to belong to other eras, but all with the same look, a look from someone who has already seen what comes next. I didn't need to ask. I knew who they were. The saints, the intercessors, the invisible army. They were not unreachable figures like in the stained glass windows of churches. They were real people. I saw a black woman in maid's clothes smiling with a strength that dispelled any doubt. I saw a young Asian man with a worn-out Bible on his lap. I saw a man with no teeth, laughing as if he had just left a family dinner. And Jesus was among them, not in the center, not above, with them. And then came the strongest revelation of my entire NDE. They were the ones who sustained the world until now. They were the ones who prepared the ground for what will happen in May 2025. I didn't understand right away. But then I saw every prayer whispered in the dark, every forgiveness offered in silence, every act of love done without an audience. All of this was like bricks in the foundation of what was to come. The world always thought that power lay with the big people, the rich, the leaders. But there, before me, were the true pillars of reality, the humble who never stopped praying. And all of them were getting ready. It was as if they were waiting for a silent order, a knock from the sky, a marked moment, the same moment I saw in the previous visions. May 2025. One of the saints looked at me, not with his eyes, but with his soul, and I felt like a soft explosion in my chest. You have been called to be a witness. We prayed for it. Now it is your turn. At that moment, I felt neither weight nor fear. I felt honored, and for the first time, I understood. Death is not the end. Collapse is not ruin. The signal is not panic. It is the beginning of something that is already being built in the invisible. And then, everything around me started to vibrate, as if a celestial drum was announcing that time was running out, and fast. What came next wasn't an image, it was a sound, but not like any sound I've ever heard. It didn't come from outside, it came from inside, from above, from all sides at once. It was as if every cell of my being vibrated with it. It was a melody, but not made of notes, was sound life, pulsing with purpose. At first, it felt like a distant symphony, as if the universe itself was breathing in music. But the more I listened, the more I understood. It wasn't just music. It was communication. It was a language older than any language. It was the sound of creation speaking to the Creator. And then, without effort, I started to hear prayers, not as isolated requests, but as sound light lines, intertwined like a living network. Every prayer, from a desperate mother's, "God, help me," to a lonely man's silent, "Thank you," it had shape, color, and sound. I saw the prayers rising like trails of shimmering gold. And off we go, answers coming down, soft as wind, firm as rock. It was at that moment that Jesus spoke within me again. With the same calm authority I already knew, this is the sound that will sustain the world through what is to come. And I understood. May 2025. It will not just be marked by external events. It will be a test of spiritual attunement. Those who are in tune with this sound, with the language of heaven, they will resist. They will flourish in the midst of chaos. But those who are deaf to this will be lost. I saw entire cities becoming spiritually silent, places where no one else prayed, no one else searched. And in those places, the darkness was as thick as smoke, heavy, paralyzing. But in places where the sound of prayer echoed, there was light, not physics, spiritual, alive, unbreakable. I saw children praying and releasing waves of energy that enveloped entire neighborhoods. I saw sick people praying for the healing of others, and silent miracles happening without cameras, without witnesses, but recorded in heaven. Jesus showed me that when the collapse came, when the awakening shocks the world, when the sky showed its sign, it will be the prayer that defines who remains and who falls. And I felt an urgency that burned inside. Time was running out. Like a cosmic hourglass, the grains of eternity flowed quickly. And then Jesus said, "The earth will hear this sound soon. Some will understand, others will scoff, but everyone will feel it." At that moment, I saw the clock. Not an ordinary watch, but a celestial marker. And he was almost zero. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. This was more real than anything I had ever experienced with my eyes open. There, in the center of that space that was not space, I saw a clock, but not a ticking clock. It was like a living structure, made of pulsating light, with gears that turned to the sound of the universe. Every rotation, every beat, was a beat of the divine plan, and he was almost zero. There were no numbers, but you knew what it meant. There was little left, very little. Jesus didn't need to say anything this time. The revelation came in full, like a wave of light passing through my spirit. May 2025 is a turning point, not an end, but a divider. At that moment, everything intensified. The visions came back in flashes: spiritual awakening, economic collapse, mass revival, the heavenly sign. Every event seemed to revolve around this spiritual clock, as if they were all set to happen in a time already chosen, already determined, and now inevitable. I felt the pulse of time. Not chronological time, but time of the Spirit. It was as if the sky was saying, "Prepare yourself, humanity. The last call is near." And it was there that realization hit me like silent thunder. The clock didn't measure minutes. It measured hearts. Each awakened heart delayed the fall. Each sincere prayer gained precious seconds. But every hardened soul, every act of despair, of anger, of denial, speeded up the pointer. And then Jesus showed me a scene. Millions of people running, lost, without direction, screaming, knocking on doors that wouldn't open. And on the other side, few, with eyes closed, in silence, listening to the sound of heaven and remaining at peace. I understood. The preparation was internal. It didn't matter how much food you had stockpiled. It didn't matter how many followers, how many degrees, how much fame. Only the heart aligned with the sky clock would be ready. It was at that moment that everything around me started to get dark, not in a fearful tone, but like a theater that closes the curtains when the act ends. I knew it. The revelation was almost complete, and there was one more secret he wanted to show me. As darkness took over that sacred space, a question began to echo within me, one I had not yet asked. Why me? I wasn't religious. I never looked for God. I never fasted. I never read the entire Bible. I never preached anything. And yet, I was there, before Jesus, before the truth, faced with the time that was about to end. The answer didn't come as I expected. It wasn't with explanations. It was with sensation. Jesus wrapped me with something that looked like a cloak, a heat that penetrated even the spirit. And within that, I felt all the times when, without even knowing it, I had been touched by him. Every moment I almost gave up on life. Every tear I hid in the bathroom. Every time I screamed, "Why?" in the wind. He was there, always has been. And then he spoke. Not with audible words, but with pure truth. You were chosen because the world listens to the unlikely. That disarmed me. Me, the skeptic, the network technician, the average guy from Arizona. He was exactly the kind of person who needed to experience that. Because when someone like me says they saw Jesus, they heard heaven, they felt spiritual time running out, people pay attention, they stop, they doubt it, yes, but they listen. And that's when Jesus showed me the faces of several people, faces I had never seen. Men, women, young people, elderly, people in every corner of the planet. And he said to me, without saying, they will listen to you, even if it's through a video, even if it's through a click, even if it's with skepticism. You just need to talk. Then, one last image appeared before me. It was the earth, seen from above, rotating slowly, enveloped in a faint light. But little by little, this light was intensifying, first in isolated points, then in entire regions, until the darkness began to recede, and I understood. Everything I saw was not a sentence. It was an invitation, an urgent call, yes, but full of hope, full of mercy, and at the center of it all, each person's choice. That's when I felt something different, a kind of force pulling me back, not with violence, but with purpose. The time for revelation was running out. Mission time was about to begin. The force that started pulling me wasn't like gravity. It was something deeper, as if one's self-time was calling me back. I felt my spirit being wrapped around the flesh again, heavenly consciousness being sewn into the body. But even as this happened, Jesus remained. He didn't disappear. He didn't distance himself. He just looked into me with a silence so full of meaning that I cried, not with my eyes, but with my soul. And then, he spoke for the last time. Time is almost up. Ethan, speak, show, alert, and love. The time has come. I remember those words perfectly. They weren't just said, they were branded into me, as if they were recorded in fire, in light, in sound, all at the same time. As the surrounding light dissolved, I began to see both worlds at the same time. The spiritual world, with its eternal sounds, its vibrations, its absolute peace, and the physical world, with its noises, its fears, its struggles. And between these two worlds, it was no longer Ethan who entered into that experience. Something inside me had changed irreversibly. I didn't come back with superpowers. I didn't come back with magic formulas. But I came back with something that many today still don't have. Conviction. Conviction that May 2025 will be a watershed for humanity. What 4 events will shake the earth, not as punishments, but as awakenings, called trumpets disguised as chaos and beauty. Conviction that Jesus is alive. It is present, and sincere hearts are waiting before it's too late. Because now I know the clock in heaven does not measure seconds. It measures choices, and he is zeroing. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.